Welcome to the Grow Podcast. I'm Pastor Mike with New Hope Network. We're here to help you take your next step in your relationship with Jesus. I'm so glad you're with us today.
What's up, New Hope family? Welcome to the Grow Podcast, episode 63, Vision Sunday Grow Podcast.
Yes.
Very exciting. Pastor Mike is with me as always. My name is David. We are so excited that you're here. We love all of the Grow Podcasties. We need Pastor Mike, you need to come up with a cool name.
Podcast-E. Is that
a cool name for all the people that listen to the Grow Podcast.
The what? The growers?
Our producer says growers.
No.
It's pretty good.
No, we'll have to put some creative juices around.
Justin Bieber's fans were Bieberites, or no, what were they?
Okay, do not put us in the same category there.
Right, we're not quite to his level yet, but we'll get there. Have you seen him lead worship with Maverick City Music?
I think I've seen a video.
It's pretty
of
remarkable to watch. It's just something you never would have expected.
Yeah.
With who he was, and then he's singing Gyra with Chandler Moore and How He Loves, and you're like, oh, this is odd. This is an odd experience.
It's an odd juxtaposition.
Ooh,
you like that?
That's
your vocabulary.
That's
word
your
for the
vocabulary
day.
word from the day from Pastor Mike. I hope all of you were with us on Vision Sunday. As we're recording this, it hasn't happened yet in person, but we have already recorded your message for New Hope Here, the online campus, and it's awesome, and I'm very excited for it. I'm very excited for everybody to be a part of it, get to hear it, maybe get encouraged, inspired, challenged, all sorts of fun
I'm curious,
things.
as you listen to it, and I know that there's some video elements of it too that are history. Is there any part of the New Hope story that was new to you? I mean, we've told it a few times. So was there anything that was new to you?
The specific number we're gonna get. Are we gonna get to those? I can't remember if you had that in your notes, but like the specific, like the 2000 since 2020.
Since 2000.
Or sorry, 2000 since 2000.
That would be amazing. 2000 since 2020.
2000 since 2020. We've been really crushing it the last 2 years. I don't think I had heard that before.
Yeah.
I mean, I think a lot of it I had heard just from like you and I having conversations, not necessarily from hearing like when you're preaching or anything like that. Either since I've been on staff or before I was on staff, but I'm trying to think if there was anything else. There might have been a couple other things in there that were, I don't know. So much of it is so like, I mean, I'm as a person who loves history, I like when we talk about that stuff. So, that video is fun for me, even though it's
just part of a larger video that was from
it's this 30-minute long,
yeah.
grainy 90s video, but it's just super cool to see because it's a history, and I like that.
It's fun as you watch through it, and they didn't all make in what we used on the weekend. There's, let's see, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 interviews that are on there of people who are still very active. In fact, cool. The original couple is still active and attending our church, struggling with some health things these days. But it's just fun to be able to see that history and to have those individuals still part after almost 60 years.
Yeah, they've got to be, if we ranked all of the people who started churches in the history of America, sticking it out for 60 years at the church you started has to be pretty rare.
Because, I mean, as we talked about, there's change. Change happens.
Right.
And life is about change. And we all work through change in different ways. And sometimes the change, is one we struggle with or somewhat that's maybe not for us in our season. And these are some amazing individuals, Jim and Carolyn Smith and Ward Joyta Kozer, Dwayne Levon Hartle, a younger couple who was on there, Robin and John Pasternak. If any of you join us. And they've just weathered and walked through and been so amazingly supportive and part of the mission over the years.
Yeah, I can't imagine being a part of a church for 60 years and not being driven insane by some of the changes and the new, and I'd be like, what is happening?
Yeah, and we all love change as long as it's our idea.
Yeah.
and quite honestly, in a world that's constantly changing, if we're real honest, the one place we really don't want change is our church.
Sure.
Because that is where some of where we find our security, not always in healthy ways, but our security. And so to be able to go through and say, okay, the core is not changing, but how we do this can change and needs to change. To have the maturity to do that is amazing.
Yeah. You're going to need to slide out a frame like you did last week.
Oh, did we not start the timer?
It's very possible that the timer once again did not get started. So we're going to perform a magic trick real quick here.
All right. So you keep talking.
Hey, no one wants to listen to a podcast where just I talk for a while. What if Pastor Mike just left? Just walked out the door and left, and for the next 20 to 25 minutes, you and I, good listeners / viewer, just hang out. We might have higher engagement
if suddenly.
I don't know if that's true. I don't know if my engagement would last 25 minutes. Just listening.
There'd be a couple of really good episodes.
Listening to myself talk for 20 minutes. But I think the first thing I want to talk about from Vision Sunday, again, we haven't had it in person yet.
Right.
In Williston.
But you've been able to hear the message already.
But I already heard it. And you get very emotional when you talk about our vision. I'm
Shocker.
Well, and I mean, I'm a pretty emotional person myself. So that's, that like I connect in that moment because that's how I am about things that I'm extremely passionate about that are the most important things to me. And so, just where does that emotion come from? Where does that passion come from?
It's a good question. Probably all of the trauma I had from childhood. No, I'm just kidding.
And we're going to dive deep into that now.
Kylie and I were talking about this the other night. We were sitting out in the backyard and just kind of enjoying an evening. And just, I think for some reason, my heart, my passion for the church, capital C church, even more so than what's happening with New Hope, and that matters. Capital C church has increased and keeps increasing, and I don't know how to say it. There's a part, I don't know if there's a kind of a locked room inside of me that sometimes, there's a blazing fire. I think Jeremiah wrote, it feels sometimes like a fire shut up in his bones. I think that was Jeremiah. Somebody looked that up.
That was actually the Beatles.
Sure. Yeah. Pretty sure that was Jeremiah. Producer, are you looking it up right now? All right.
We will let you know soon.
Yeah. I thought that was Jeremiah. Now it's going to bug me until I know. But it's just been increasing over time. And I think part of what increases it is when you see it happen. When you see it happen. There are some statistics that we talked about, and statistics aren't the most exciting thing, but the first time I read those when I was reading it to a couple people for feedback and how I communicated this, I had to stop. I could not continue because every one of those numbers, so 2,000 people since the year 2000 through the ministry of New Hope, and those are people whose names we have.
Right.
Not those who have made decision and not told us. But 2,000 people since the year 2000, and 70% of those since 2011, have made first time or have walked away from the Lord and really made a decision to surrender their lives to the Lord. Every one of those numbers is a person.
Right. Yeah.
It's not just... There we go. It's not just a number. It's not just a statistic. Nope. It's a person. And as you can see, that motivates me.
Yeah.
And are there some core values I'm convinced of? Yeah. I'll get emotional when we start talking about go, grow, give. Why are we serious about lost people being found? John 14, Jesus talks about, I'm going to prepare a place for you. If it were not so, I would have told you. Eternity, this sounds like the greatest understatement in history. Eternity is longer than time. And it matters to me and should matter to us that I want people to know where their eternity is going. That they can be certain about their eternity. When we talk about growth and about small groups, I'm not just passionate about it because it's a good idea.
Yeah.
I'm passionate about it because I know personally that you will never become the person that God, I'm going to get excited about this. You will never become the person that God intended for you to become outside of community.
Right.
It can't happen.
Yep.
You say, well, I think I'll be okay. Yeah. You can live in a shack by the riverside and survive, And that might appeal to you, but it's not the way you were designed to live. You were designed to live a quality life. And then when we talk about giving, sacrifice, this is the hardest one to learn. Sacrifice guards our heart. It really, really does. And it's probably the hardest lesson for us to learn, sacrificing and serving, sacrificing and giving. I've had multiple conversations recently with what's happening in our workforce these days, where there's this growing movement, and I get it, I understand it, but this growing movement of people are saying, I want to work, but I want to work on my terms, when I can, whenever I can, and without any pressure. And the problem is, that's like saying, I want to produce diamonds without pressure.
Sure.
It doesn't happen. You will never, you will become somebody who is self-centered, who is self-absorbed. You need to be able to sacrifice and be involved in and do things that cost. Yeah. That's why David, in the story in
King
the Old
David.
Testament, King David, not David with an I, and I'm drawing a blank as to the location of Scripture, but pretty sure is in First Chronicles, not Second Chronicles, maybe in Samuel. We'll have to look at it, but where he's bringing the ark back to Jerusalem, and stopped for a place of worship, and the farmer offered him the building for free. So he was willing to sacrifice, and David's going, I'm not going to worship a place I haven't paid for. Wasn't ego. Part of worship flows out of sacrifice. And you don't understand what worship is until you sacrifice. So all those things come together, I think, just to feed and stoke those fires. And when you see it happen in your own life, it stokes the fires. When you see it happen in person after person after person after person, it's like an atomic reaction happens, and it begins to light those fires. When you haven't seen it for a while, your heart can grow cold and you don't even know it.
Yeah. We've talked, I think, on here before, but a lot just in our personal relationship about how, you reminded me of my dad when we first started coming to church here. And it's not, you have different personalities in a lot of ways. It wasn't necessarily the personality, but it was the heart, like the heart for people, for lost people becoming found people. It was just so blatantly obvious from, once we really started to understand who you were and listen to you preach and talk. And then obviously once I got to know you more, but I think I've told you this before. The first time I ever saw my dad cry, which has been like 2 times in my whole life, was while he was preaching on this same thing. Why do we at Riverside, that's the name of his church, why do we at Riverside care about lost people? And when you talk about the statistics and they have a phrase, I don't think I've said it here on the Grow podcast before, but every number matters because every number has a name, every name has a story, and every story matters to God. And I've always loved that. I'll steal it someday and pretend it was my own. But they just matter so much. So that's why when I, that not only was that cool because that was, I hadn't heard that before, but that's 2,000 human beings, 2,000 souls that came to Jesus through my church, and that's so incredible. I mean, the Bible tells us that they celebrate when one person gets to know. So we had 2,000 parties in heaven because of the work done through New Hope in the last 22 years.
And one of the things I've had to remind myself of, especially in the last 2 years, but over, when the oil boom in North Dakota busted, the insane oil boom of 2010, 2011 through, what was it, the mid-teens, and we talked about how one summer we saw 300 New Hopers that we know of move away. Wow. And after That's COVID, crazy. You begin to look at some of the numbers and different things and you begin to get discouraged. And I think the Holy Spirit has had to remind me lately of, yes, people have moved away, but there's people who came, discovered Jesus, who are now in another part of the country, another part of the world. And if they had gone there before they came here, there would be no salt and light. Now there's salt and light there, and they're representing Jesus. So that will echo into eternity, and we will only hear and see those stories echoed when we get to eternity, because we have no idea.
And for people, you listed off people that were in the video we showed on the weekend. So, but for people who've been here for years and years and years, and they've heard your, a similar Vision Sunday message. They've heard us talk about Go, Grow, and Give, and caring about
this. Yeah.
But it's important to talk about these things because that's like you were saying. That's how you fuel that passion for those things and your emotional connection to why this matters. It's by telling these stories. It's by reminding ourselves of what's important and what our mission is, and that's why we do this every year.
I don't know who said it first. I'm quoting a lot of people. I can't remember who it was. Vision leaks. Vision leaks. Passion leaks.
Yeah.
And I don't know why God made us that way. I think that's part of who we are. Maybe sin damaged us that way. I don't entirely know. But it's like pouring water, into this, and it's got holes in the bottom. In order to keep it full, you have to keep pouring water. And in order for your heart to remain hot, you have to keep refilling it and refilling it with the same stuff.
Yeah.
It's like, okay, I know what's going in it. I know this. Yeah, but it's leaking out.
Yeah.
And you don't even always know it. So we need to constantly come back and revisit it. I need it.
Yeah.
If I haven't heard a good story of life change in a while, I don't even know it in my heart. It's easy for me to get cold or cynical or discouraged.
I've noticed that too since working here, where same thing. If it's been a while since I heard the relevance of what I'm doing is actually mattering in people's lives, it certainly starts to become more just work, just tedious things. I have to get this checklist done every single week, as opposed to like I'm doing these things for a much greater purpose than to make sure this podcast looks and sounds good, or to make sure this video is uploaded on time or whatever. And so I think we all need that.
And this wasn't in our plan, but this is just an invitation for those of you who join us on the Grow podcast. We'd love to hear your story.
Yeah, we would.
We'd love to hear your story, and not the organization of New Hope, but the people of New Hope.
Yep.
How did God use New Hope to grow your relationship with the Lord, to help you take a next step, maybe to help you come to know the Lord? And maybe it's selfish for us to ask that, because I want to hear the story and I need to hear the story. But we would love to, with your permission, even be able to share some of those stories. Maybe there's a future podcast episode where we just share some of the stories. And that'd be fun.
info@newhopewilliston.com or David, Daved, at newhopewilliston.com. So, we'd love to hear those.
Love to do that.
Let's move on to the next thing. And if your answer to this question is the online campus director, I will be cutting it out of the video.
I'm wondering where you're going with this one.
Are there, what don't you like about New Hope? You've been 11 years?
11 years.
11 years.
Just
so everything's perfect.
Yeah.
You got everything exactly how you want it at all times.
Well, they say after you've been the leader of a place for 3 to 5 years, all the problems are your own fault. The problem is we have a lot of stuff that always needs to be changed. So there's always something. I love Robert Schuller years ago said, we don't aim for perfection. I need to remind myself of this, but we do work on growing. And there's always stuff that we need to grow on, work on. I even outlined in Vision Sunday some areas four specific areas that we need to work on this year. And I know there might have been some, myself included. It's like, what's the next big mountain? What's the next big thing? And I think God is saying right now, these are big things. And these are things we need to grow in. And there's some matter of time of preparation. Last week we talked about how to face a giant, and diligence and effort and submission and experience. Don't try and get past what God is doing right now. He's using what's happening right now to prepare you for what's next. And there are some big things. One of the big things I know of for us, and not just because I'm talking to the director of our digital campus, but we've got to go bigger and wider and deeper into the digital world. We can talk all day long about the effects of the digital world on our world, and there's a lot of negative as well as a lot of positive. I heard someone from Microsoft the other day say, our goal is to own as much of your attention as we can.
Yep.
No, and admitting that's not healthy, but it's good for our business. And I'm like, okay, what's that doing to our souls? So that's a different discussion for spiritual growth.
Next week's podcast.
But that's where the world is.
Right.
And we don't want to ignore it. If that's happening, let's go in there and let's help bring Jesus into that world instead of it poisoning our souls. So we've got to go bigger, deeper, and that's time intensive, as you well know. It's resource intensive. The stuff we do that looks easy, you guys do that looks easy, is not easy and quick. And so we need to expand our resources. We need to expand, studio and all those kinds of things in order for us to move in that world. In our in-person facilities, we
That's
need to
newhopehere.com/give, in case you're wondering.
we need to expand our technology in our in-person.
Yeah.
And it, because that piggybacks on that.
Yep.
This building that we're in Williston that we just fixed the roof on. You say, well, we just built it. Well, it's 8 years ago. Technology outdates itself about every 24 months, and we need to make sure we're using the best tools. If reaching lost people matters, then we should use the best tools we can use to reach lost people.
What you talked about, things that are next. So what is, it was interesting. You asked me earlier the things I hadn't heard about our history. So you had online, you had the two, I assume you're going to be using them in person, the two boards that we had behind you. I had never seen the one with like the plans for not the building we're in now, but the
original building on this property.
Yeah, the original. I was going to say, I don't know how to word what that building was.
The second building for Williston.
Yeah.
The first one was in another part of town, now being used by another church.
But I had never seen that before, so that was cool.
Yeah.
When, as we were setting up to record, I was just kind of looking at it, and because it's not like something we've made to remember it. It's there.
It's the original.
It's so cool
that they use.
I'm so glad that got kept.
Yeah. We've got a few things like that are just fun to have around.
The other one was
our 4-hour circle.
Yep, the 4-hour circle with the 30 by 30, and so what's next for us?
Speaking of numbers, there's a number that actually caught me off guard, because in 2015 we had a group of people go off site and begin to pray and plan about where God is taking us next. And out of that came this faith goal of 30 gatherings within a 4-hour drive of Williston by 2030, 30 by 30. And I had no idea. We had no idea. We've talked about that before, how that was going to happen.
Yep.
Well, we just started doing the math. And first of all, God's taken us outside of that 4-hour circle, which we didn't expect. But we have either
crazy how he does things like that from time to time.
Already started, or starting, or getting ready to start. So those three things, at least that we can count, 11 gatherings. Some of them within that 4-hour circle, some out of that. Some of them independent churches, some of them churches that we were associated with, but now we're more directly connected with, and I'm coaching. Some of them gatherings through New Hope Here, one campus in Tioga and one campus in Williston, and almost all of those, except some of the existing churches that have come alongside us and want to be part of this movement, have started since the pandemic. Which is a time that should not happen.
Right.
Which I think God did on purpose, so we can't take an ounce of credit for it, because we can't.
Yeah.
We just got to go along for the ride and try and catch up with him. So we've got 19 more to go, because 30 minus 11, that's math. Math is hard.
That was really good. Earlier you said statistics don't matter, and I felt bad for all of the math teachers that might join us. So now they're back on board now that you can subtract 11 from 30, I think.
That's about the extent of my math skills. Yeah. No.
Yeah, well, if 19 of you would just like to start a gathering next week, we could wrap that goal up and see what's next.
And we are looking at campuses in places across our 4-hour region and beyond. We've had multiple conversations over the years. Not many of those have come into play. We're looking for leaders. Our PH Church, Pagasa and Hundog Church, just celebrated their 1-year anniversary. Received their founding members have membership into it, and it was an amazing thing. Amazing day.
Haven't yet, which probably most of you haven't, but I don't know, maybe all of you have. But go and watch that on their Facebook page.
Yeah.
Because, and it was great. Wes, the district superintendent, came and spoke, which was very cool. I got to watch that. But skip to the end and watch Pastor Leo lead a dance at the beginning, and you're welcome in advance. That's my homework for you this week, is to go watch Pastor Leo lead a dance.
But there's a deal where Leo, he's a first generation in the United States from the Philippines, hesitatingly joined our worship team. I was on our worship team and struggled even for a while to be on the worship team, but because of some moving into the country and stuff, couldn't even get a driver's license for a while. Was working in our school system, and God called him to start this church. So, for those who say, I could never be a pastor, I can never be a pastor, and there's maybe some people I've had that conversation with. But I would never say David's name out loud.
No, you wouldn't think about it.
But listen to God's call.
Yeah.
Listen to God's call. Because, Isaiah, the amazing leader who leads our Tioga campus right now, Isaiah, and he may teach someday, but he's not gifted or called to teach, but he can lead. Mm-hmm. And he can lead, and that's and love on people and care for people, and that's what he does in Tioga. And so there's all different ways that we can be involved. We can all be involved in this.
Yeah. Do you have any, not homework? I gave the homework. Do you have a next step for us this week? We've really tried to transition away from homework because homework doesn't sound good. But you have to do your homework of watching Pastor Leo dance. But do you have any next steps for us?
I think if you haven't watched Vision Sunday and you call New Hope home and are part of us, go back and watch that. Yep. If you missed any one of our Be the Church series, particularly the first 3, do that. And the big question I would love for us all to ask the Holy Spirit, what part do you want me to play? We gave everyone in person and anyone who requested it online a key. And actually, I had mine hanging around my neck, and Olivia needed it for something else. So it's like, but you have 900 others. But I don't know. But it's just a physical reminder. Sometimes we need physical reminders for that. Of you are the key to the next 60 years. You are the key to the next 6 years. And think of and just listen to the Holy Spirit. What does that look like for you? I'm asking the Holy Spirit that question these days is, what's my role is this next season? Because every season he shifts and adjusts where I need to focus on this and focus on this. So I think that's something we all need to be asking, and then say yes.
Yeah. Yeah, let's definitely say yes. Yeah. Well, thanks to all of you for being here. I really liked this Be the Church series. Anytime we just dive into who we are and why are we what we are, why does New Hope exist? What's the mission of the church? I just think that's always a great reminder for us. So I've really enjoyed your teaching and Hattie's teaching during it as well. It was cool to have Hattie preach. And I'm very excited for what's next.
Yeah. You want to talk about what's next real quick?
Yeah, go for it.
So we're starting next week the big series. So it's kind of confusing. The big series we're calling Greatest Story Ever Told, because we're walking cover to cover through the Bible, not verse by verse, but section by section, and how it all connects together.
31 weeks?
Yeah, it's just over 31. I want to say it's 33 weeks.
33 weeks. Okay. 33 weeks.
But it takes us starting September 18th and taking us all the way past Easter. So we'll land on the resurrection right on Easter. Got all
what a coincidence.
We're taking a little bit of a break for Christmas, a couple of weeks there. And then after Easter, we'll continue to talk about the early church and on into Revelation and finish it out at the beginning of May in 2023. But to make it a little bit easier, we've broken it into smaller sections. So starting on September 18th, we're starting the Greatest Story Ever Told, but I'm calling the first 6 weeks Threads.
Yep.
And we're just going to be in Genesis. Because Genesis, great stories, but we have to understand it. There are threads and repeating things in there that when we understand them, we find that thread connected to King David, who we talked about last week. We find it to the prophets. We find it to Jesus. There's moments talked about all the way from the Garden of Eden that connect directly to Jesus and the crucifixion. Abraham asked to sacrifice his son, and spoiler, on the same mountain that later Jesus was sacrificed. God does nothing by accident, and and he wants us to know he's at work, and it's all connecting together. So we're going to start by looking at some of those threads so that then we can trace them. Yeah. And we're going to do some cool visuals with it and some other things that'll help us remember.
Yeah, I'm excited for the way you're teaching it too. And make sure you join us for that. Make sure you get in a small group here in the fall as well. Lots of small groups available. And you even talked about earlier just how important community is. And that's a really great way to find your small community is getting a small group. So thank you for being here. Thank you, Pastor Mike. Remember that growth always starts with the next step. So let's make sure we take our next steps this week, continue to grow, and we will see you next time.